Just because a thought comes into your head doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Just because it landed there doesn't mean it needs to live there, and doesn't mean you have to agree with it. And there's a lot of freedom in that. We can teach ourselves and wire our brains to create different scenarios that are not actually true. And so you have to challenge it. Just because, like I said, it comes into our head doesn't mean that it's true, doesn't mean that it's right, doesn't mean that it's a fact.
Let's focus on what's really true, what's really good, what's really lovely in this circumstance, and then it allows you the freedom to move forward.
And the other thing is, like, fear is very good at being loud. Get it out of your head, meaning with people that you trust, whether it's with a coach, whatever it is, but share those thoughts, share those fears, because once you actually voice it and you get it out there, then it starts to lose its power.
Hello, momentum builders. Welcome back to another episode of Sippin Matcha and helping you make more sales. I want to invite you into the conversation by either submitting your question at buildingmomentum.info/matcha, or you can join the conversation by leaving us a review or commenting on this video or podcast, wherever you find it out. We'd appreciate hearing from you and helping us get the word out. Let's bring Brooke into the conversation today. Hello, Brooke. We have matcha for you. We've acquired some more, so the crisis is stopping a little bit. Let's jump into today's conversation, and here's the question. What do I do with the voices in my head? So, like, get your husband more coffee.
Or I need a matcha. Matcha, matcha. No. What do I do with the voices in my head? This can be a vulnerable question, but I really appreciate it. And so, as people know, I have had a master's in counseling. And so, just so we're clear, when we talk about the voices in our head, we're not talking like medical concerns like schizophrenia and things like that. We're talking about like when there's the anxiety, when there are voices going on of like, you're a failure, this isn't going to work, and we start to spiral out. That's what we're talking about today in regards to what do we do when those things happened. And that happened to us, to me specifically, about 3 or 4 years ago now, Scott. Is that right?
Yeah, it was probably about three and a half years ago. Our daughter started into 9th grade, so it was at the end of her 5th grade year. And then I know this was a time for you, and you'll tell us more about it. I know, like in sales for me too, it may happen more often to me. Like when I get into a conversation of, oh no, like this is going to go bad. This is disaster. We're not just talking, some of the principles may apply, but we're not talking about other areas. We'll look at the sales conversations, and sometimes we get sort of psyching ourselves out, would be a way that I might put it.
100%. And it's not necessarily that it's the sales activities that are causing us to do that. Sometimes there are other things going on in life that mess with our heads in regards to when it comes to doing sales. And so that happened when our daughter got sick. So for me, I just left my corporate. We had signed a massive contract. Everything was looking incredible in regards to starting our business. And then our daughter Tora got sick, and she got pretty sick in regards to ambulance rides and emergency surgeries and going back and forth and staying in the hospitals, all the way to the point of having to have a PICC line for 6 weeks. We went from a healthy child to one where we just had no idea what was going on. And even though we were in one of the best hospitals in the world, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they're a fantastic hospital, they just kept telling us, we have no idea. We don't know what's going on. We don't know why this is happening. We don't know what to do. And so it was just bad news after bad news after bad news after bad news. And all the while, we're trying to start our business. So I'm trying to do sales calls in the ER, all of this stuff. And it got to a point where it continued to spiral, one, in regards to like what's going to happen with Tora and all of the scary things like that. And then two, how that was affecting the business of like, how can I be talking about these things? Do I really know what I'm saying? Like just all of this self-doubt and just spiraling. And I needed to get help. So That's what we did.
Yeah, and you're going to be sharing kind of some of the principles that have come from both your training and from our own personal experience with this. But you are right. Like, we are whole people. And so it's virtually
it's a holistic
not even
problem.
That's right. It's not even virtual. Like, it's just impossible to think, oh, I can separate out the sales portion of my job or the work part of my job and not have other things impact that. And so sometimes we do have false beliefs about our own abilities with regards to sales and that. And sometimes there's other stuff going on that are impacting the way that we view our work and interact with it.
Yeah.
So, oh, wise one, what are some of the principles? What are some of the things that you found helpful in being able to focus on what's important at that moment?
Yes. So the first thing is we talked about how what can happen in sales are things, and from a holistic standpoint, things can be going kind of rough in the family or with kids or just different responsibilities. Also, things that can get into our head is if we're spending so much time looking at competitors, comparing ourselves to others. Those are the things that can, quote unquote, trigger those different insecurities and feeling, okay, I'm like, who am I? How is this actually going to come into play? So the very first thing is, just because a thought comes into your head doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Just because it landed there doesn't mean it needs to live there, and doesn't mean you have to agree with it. And there's a lot of freedom in that. So if we're on a call and we get off the call and it's like, oh, that one awful, we don't have to keep entertaining that. If we're getting ready to do a follow-up and we're like, okay, they're probably going to get annoyed because what am I doing? We don't have to agree with that. Now, in regards to our service framework, I teach you different things in regards to how we don't want our follow-up to be annoying, and we do want to be intentional in our sales conversations. But beyond that, even when that thought comes into our head, it doesn't have to stay there. We can get rid of it.
Yeah, and most of the time, unless you're just completely oblivious, like if somebody answers your call, if somebody takes your call, like, they're okay talking with you. Like, it's not annoying. It's not true, and it's not accurate. And so, like, when we start to think, oh man, I'm really kind of annoying them today. Well, if you're really annoying them, they probably wouldn't pick up the phone. And they probably wouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah. And I would say along with that, so if you have those thoughts, just ask yourself just one question. You need to ask yourself, is this true? Do I have proof that this is true? Have they told me this point blank? Or am I making assumptions because it's not that it's true, it's just it sounds so familiar. We can teach ourselves and wire our brains to create different scenarios that are not actually true. And so you have to challenge it. Just because, like I said, it comes into our head doesn't mean that it's true, doesn't mean that it's right, doesn't mean that it's a fact. And so we have to challenge that and say, okay, is this actually true? Did they actually tell me this? Or am I making an assumption? And I just think this is happening because this is just a familiar thought that I have.
Yeah, and I know one way that we talk about this, and obviously our faith is important to us, and there's a verse in the Bible that talks about like whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's just, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's commendable, and it goes on. But then it says, think about these things. Yeah. So it's a good principle, not just for faith, but for life. Let's focus on what's really true, what's really good, what's really lovely in this circumstance, and then it allows you the freedom to move forward.
Yes, because if we live with the thoughts that this is annoying, they are not going to buy from me anyways, why am I even doing this? Whatever, or look at them, they're so much further ahead than I am, why would I even try? If we live with those, if we allow them to continue to keep staying in our head, it turns almost into this self-fulfilled prophecy. Because now we feel that way, we start acting that way, and if we're acting that way, then those things are going to happen. And we don't want that. And so that's the very first piece. Like, it doesn't have to stay there. You need to challenge it and then get rid of it. Yeah. But then that sometimes doesn't work.
Well, before we jump on to the next thing, I know that you end up coaching and talking to lots of clients, and obviously we're not sharing names or that, but what are some of the untrue things that you've heard that people often think about sales when they're on those calls, or when they're even before the call, like they're not even picking up the phone yet? Like, what are some of the untrue things? I know you touched on them in passing, but to circle back and go back into that a little bit more.
100%. So one of the biggest ones is, I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be that sales person. And so they swing all the way to the other side, trying to avoid that. Sometimes when we're talking about, hey, we're trying to understand where the customer's problems are and being able to ask intentional follow-up questions, they're like, no, I don't want to get invasive. I don't want to get into their business. That's not what I want to do, because they feel like that's intrusive. They feel like that is like crossing a line, whether someone did that to them and that's why they feel that way, or they just think that there's no way to be able to actually do that in a way that serves someone, instead of it being like that manipulative way of where you turn it around. And so a lot of times it's, if they're not picking up the phone, I don't want to annoy them. And if they are not necessarily doing the intentional follow-up, again, they would have called me if they wanted to work with me. Those are the types of things we start telling ourselves instead of the actual truth of what's going on. So we just make all of these assumptions about ourselves and about the people we're trying to serve.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about like that statistic, and we probably need to get the updated statistic, because I think it's even more contacts
worse.
Now. It's even worse, but like the reality is most people, minimally speaking, probably aren't going to respond until the 8th call or something like that. And I know when you're in sales, you're like, so like it just, if I keep, and most salespeople give up after what? Like...
So the statistic used to be people wouldn't necessarily respond until 8 calls, and everyone pretty much gives up on call 4.
Right. So you were always like, let's keep going, and just by that. But the reality is, like, often we start freaking out about, for me, call 2. No, but
let's be honest, call 1.
Well, okay. Thanks. Whatever's true.
No, I mean when it's
lovely.
I mean, sometimes if we're talking about cold calling, people get terrified even on call 1.
Sure, yeah.
But go ahead.
But the reality is, like, it's not even worth considering, like, that there's a problem until once you're past call 8, because that's just the way that it works. You gotta keep calling people.
Yes, and I do want to encourage, because I don't want people to just get off of the podcast at this moment and be like, forget it. All she does is just, like, pound the phones. The reality is, it just takes, so if you're doing a networking thing, or you're trying to set up a schedule, or someone even reaches out to you and they say, hey, I want to learn about this. I want to learn about what you're doing. It is true. Like after 1, maybe 2, they give up. We have had so much business come after 6, 7 months of nurturing and reaching out. And not one of them has ever said, that's really annoying. It is annoying if you do 8 calls in 2 days. I'm not saying that. I am saying, but realize how it can be used.
Yeah. All right. So the tendency for all of these is that this turns into a therapy session for me, and we get bogged down on one point. Let's move on to the next one. So the first one was like, yes, let's think about what's actually true. And just because it's a familiar thought does not mean that it's actually a true thought. So what's the second?
No.
The second idea.
And the other thing is, like, fear is very good at being loud.
Yeah.
It's so loud. And so if we listen to our fears, and we're just listening in regards to which one's more intense, and we give that the validity, then it's usually always going to be fear. Okay, so the second piece is, sometimes that doesn't work. I am not naive to be like, well, all I have to do is say, let's pause a moment and think if this is true, and then it just magically gets better. Because it doesn't sometimes. It's ingrained in us, and it's pretty intense at some points. So the next piece is talk to someone. Get it out of your head, meaning with people that you trust, whether it's with a coach, whatever it is, but share those thoughts, share those fears, because once you actually voice it and you get it out there, then it starts to lose its power. And so it's not just mindset, this is what I'm going to do. It's also involving others to be able to give you support. And it takes time to be able to find those people, but they're gems. Scott is one of those for me.
Yes. Sometimes they do a good job. Sometimes she needs to talk to somebody else. So
Sometimes we hire a professional.
That's right. That's right. No, but that's one of the advantages of having a coach, someone like you for sales is I'm in a bad spot. Like I keep playing this soundtrack in my mind. Like I keep freaking out over sales calls or they all keep going the same way. Like help me think through this, help me work through this. And you can step in and provide some outside perspective. You can look at it, you can address it, and you can say, oh, hey, like, actually, you're doing really good. Or you're on the right track, make this little tweak, and it might go a little better. Or all of those types of things. And it's rarely like, oh, no, we got to start from square one. Like, that hardly ever happens. I don't
don't even remember when it actually ever has. It's just, it helps because we sometimes don't even see our false beliefs that we have about ourselves, about others. And so when you have someone else that's coming in and they're hearing what you're saying, they're able to say, hey, actually, that sounds like da, 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 da. Or is this really true? There's that gracious challenging in it to encourage them to be able to see it from the light of truth instead of fear and anxiety.
Great. All right. So talk to somebody else. And then the first one was let's think about the true things, and fear is often louder and familiar is not always accurate. I think you've got one more idea for us. What is it?
Do the next thing. Just do the next thing. When we get in our head and we start to spiral, specifically in sales, and we're like, okay, I don't know if they're actually going to buy. I don't know if there's any point in doing this outreach. I don't know if I should be following up with them again. We will pull back, and then we're not actually doing any of those generating activities. And you don't want to be in that spot. And so you need to ask yourself, what is the very next thing that I need to do? What can I do now in the next 5 minutes to start moving in the right direction? Whether that's picking up the phone, whether that's sending out an email, whether that's doing your pre-call plan for the call that you're getting ready to do, make sure you do the next thing. If we don't, then we're just stuck. So we got to move. It's important to be able to do that. And then we have a couple of others after that, but specifically with sales, that's the next piece.
Yeah, and I think the overwhelm makes it hard it's the definition of overwhelm. It makes it hard to pick out that what's next, what's important now. And so if you can, even if it's maybe not the best next thing, like just do something, like just break the cycle, because you can get in your head and keep thinking, and it just usually you don't get out of that real easily. So just doing something will be that.
Yeah.
Now,
facing it.
Yeah. So maybe we're so overwhelmed, whether it's in sales, whether it's in life, whether it's whatever, and we can't even do anything. What are some of the things that you've learned to say, oh, maybe I need to think about like these types of things?
Yeah. So this is when it came into play with Torah and all of the things that were happening, and when we got help. And they started helping me to think through how to be able to process these things in regards to PTSD and all of that. And some of them are very simple. They're not magic bullets, but they help quite a bit. And so one of the first things they were always looking at was what's going on in your sleep. Because if your sleep is completely messed up, then it completely messes up your day. If you're waking up so many times in the middle of the night, or you can't get back to sleep afterwards, like that will affect a lot of things. And when we actually have lack of sleep, that makes these problems look even harder. And so that was one of the things we started addressing immediately. Another one is just move. Get out of your house and get outside and walk, because it's just helping to not just live inside of your head. And so whether you want to go outside and walk, whether you want to go to the gym, whatever you want to be able to do, but get out of your four walls and see and feel the air, the sun, all of that, and be able to have that. And then the other thing is like making sure you're drinking water because you don't want to be dehydrated and all of that. Now, again, I say this because someone may have heard me say PTSD and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not how you do that. I am not counseling or coaching you how to be able to work through PTSD. There's a lot more pieces to it, but those were some of the very first simple things that we had to start working on.
Yes, let's put in our official legal disclaimer. This is not official medical advice or anything like that. It's just like the principles that we've learned that have been healthy and helpful for you, and the other. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm like in my pastor mode or whatever. I think it's Martin Luther. We'll give him credit. Maybe I'm just making it up. But he, like, the most holy thing that you can do is take a nap. 8 hours of sleep. I mean, like, that's like, sometimes we overthink things. Like, hey, how about 100%. You go get a nap.
And I think the other piece is just face your fear head on. If we just let it linger in our head, if we're just quiet about it, if we're trying to hide it from everybody, especially when we're small business owners, it's like a lot of comparison that can go on a lot of the time. I can't actually share what's going on. When we live like that and when we like harbor those things, it's not going to get better. It never magically disappears. And so you have to face that. You have to face the questions that are happening. You have to face the fear instead of trying to skirt around it or try to just downplay it and just tell yourself, hey, Brooke, it's not that bad. Calm down. Hey, Brooke, it's not that bad. Calm down. That doesn't work. You have to be able to face it. And there are different ways to be able to do that.
Great. Well, this has been a little bit of a heavier, not heavier, but just a difficult conversation. But I think naming the truth, naming the things that are silent is helpful. And it does take thick skin. It does take emotional maturity. It does take some specific strategies to keep going in sales because, like, you get told no like 100 times a day. And that can be a little challenging to work through. And that. So I would 100%. Just mention that if you are, like, from a business standpoint and from a sales standpoint, you are saying, oh, like, an outside voice would be great to have. Reach out to Brooke, and she'd be happy to talk with you and help you. She's a sales coach, and she does this all the time. And occasionally I hear it while I'm working on something else in the other part of the house. If for some reason this has brought up all sorts of other issues and things in your life of counseling and that, we happen to be involved in a project behind the scenes at this point, but something called the Life Center. And you can go there. We have a few counselors that are connected with that are virtually nationwide. They do stuff remotely, and that one of which Brooke has worked with, and so you can go to the lifecenter.info. Yeah, that's right. And go to the counseling page and find some great resources there.
100%.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. And I mean, it goes without saying, though, that the answer for everything is always a cup of matcha. So we'll see ya.
Matcha and Jesus.